My name is Jim Betts, and on behalf of the Cape Charles Historic District Civic League, I welcome you to the first of two candidates' nights of 2022. Before I turn the program over to our moderator, I would like to tell you a little bit about the Civic League. We are an organization not unlike Citizens for Central Park, Cape Charles Main Street, or vacation homeowners at Cape Charles. While we share many of the same stakeholders, the focus of the Civic League is on the historic district as a residential community. Our mission is threefold: to provide neighbors in the historic district a collective voice in town government by identifying opportunities for improvement and building consensus around proposed solutions. To provide the town council, the boards and commissions, as well as the town departments, a point of contact within the historic district to work on issues and projects. And finally, to keep neighbors in the historic district informed about developments and decisions affecting them. We feel that hosting tonight's Candidates Night is an example of how the Civic League can fulfill its mission. I thank you for joining us. I thank the candidates for participating. And now I will turn it over to Marty for the rest of the program. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Welcome to the Cape Charles Historic District Civic League Candidates Night. My name is Marty Mayer. I will be your moderator this evening. I'll be walking us through introductions, the format, and eventually a series of question and answer segments with the candidates. Before getting started, though, I would especially like to thank Miss Libby for her technical support, for coming in, setting this up on her day off, and the town of Cape Charles for agreeing to host our little forum this evening. A special thank you to each of the candidates, not just for agreeing to participate tonight, but for stepping up to fill these positions. Positions which will have an impact not just on the future direction of our small town, but also on the day-to-day lives of its residents. With that out of the way, I would like to briefly introduce everyone to our candidates. Starting on our left here, Mr. Ken Buda. Ken is an active member of the community, offering his time in support of several local and regional employment initiatives. Ken has a doctorate in educational leadership and has worked as an educator for 40 years, with the last 12 as a school principal. Ken is currently working as a zoning compliance officer for the town and serves on the Cape Charles Planning Commission, the Harbor Area Review Board, and is on the Cape Charles Main Street Board of Directors. To Ken's left, Mr. Paul Grossman. With multiple degrees in nuclear engineering and having retired from a career in nuclear power plant management, Paul has turned his attention to public service. A current member of Town Council and the Planning Commission, Paul also serves on several county commissions and organizations, as well as volunteers his time at his local church and with various other organizations in the local community. Beside Paul, Miss Tammy Holloway. A native Virginian, Tammy and her husband Jim opened the Bay Haven Inn of Cape Charles in 2012. Since this time, Tammy has been increasingly involved in giving back to the local community. First, as a founding member of New Roots Youth Garden, later the president of the Cape Charles Business Association, and eventually a founding member of the Cape Charles Main Street, helping to guide the town from affiliate status to full Virginia Main Street designation. Tammy was elected to Town Council in 2018 and continues to serve on several local and regional boards. Next to Tammy, Miss Ellen O'Brien. Since moving to Cape Charles full-time after more than 25 years in cardiac surgery, Ellen has served the community in a variety of roles. In 2018, she was appointed to the Cape Charles Library Board, and by 2020, she had been tabbed to succeed Mr. Chris Bannon on Town Council, later that year winning a special election for the council seat. Ellen lives, works, and runs a small business in town while volunteering in her spare time with the Eastern Shore Medical Reserves. Seated beside Ellen is Adam Charney, running for mayor. Having moved to Cape Charles nearly a decade ago and operating businesses in town since, Adam's vision for Cape Charles is resident-driven. With a deep commitment to the residents as the town attempts to navigate the next phase of the history of Cape Charles. Adam was recently appointed as an alternate on the Historic District Review Board. And finally, also running for mayor, Mr. Tim McClatchy. Tim graduated from Penn State University, raised 6 children in Northern Virginia while working in IT. He's been active in communities of his residence. Tim served as a school board advisor, the head of youth sports programming, and a coach for several years while in Northern Virginia. Tim has further worked as a part of a delegation studying workforce housing and opportunities for improving housing and job opportunities for families in the Southeast. Finally, Tim and his wife Jo are proud members of the American Legion Post 56. Hopefully I didn't screw anything up too bad there. Welcome, everybody. Just to briefly go over the format before candidates' opening statements. To make this clear, our discussion this evening is simply that. It's a discussion, it's a forum to talk about the pressing issues in town and learn more about how the candidates want to address them. This is not a debate, and the format which will follow reflects that. Each question in the first segment this evening will be addressed by each candidate. I'll begin by asking the first question, beginning with the candidate in the first position. In this case, it would be Ken. I'll repeat the question before the third and fifth candidate answers. The second question will begin with the candidate in the second position, and so on. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the question, and there will be an additional 30 seconds added for a brief follow-up or if I need additional clarity. Any questions on the format? Everyone okay to move forward? Okay, with that, let's start with candidate opening statements. We'll, again, work from left to right. Everyone has 90 seconds to introduce themselves, tell the audience the issues you're campaigning on, anything else you'd like to squeeze in. If you want to start, Ken?
Sure. I'm Ken Buda. My wife Amy and I first purchased a home here in 2010. And while our 4 kids were still in school, we were weekend visitors. Amy was a school social worker. She spent her last 2 years here working in Northampton County Public Schools. And as you heard, I spent 40 years in education as a teacher and as a principal in Virginia Public Schools. The last 12 of them, I was a principal, and I worked in high poverty, struggling schools. That was my choice to choose those schools. And in each case, I worked with the community, with the staff, to turn those into successful, fully accredited schools. And how did we do that? Well, one of the things I promised the staff and the parents of those communities was that we'd work together to identify areas of issue that we needed to change and to create solutions that work best for all, to do this stuff together. We built partnerships with local businesses, with churches, with nonprofits that would support teachers and students as we move through these programs. I think the same approach works here, that we have to have a more open government. Things should not be happening behind closed doors. Work sessions by all boards and commissions should be viewed on Facebook. That should be an option for people. I think that there needs to be more.
Thank you. I'll wait the 30 seconds.
You want me to finish your opening there?
Very soothing sound.
That's a great one.
My name is Paul Grossman. Most of you know my wife Barbara, who've been here since 2016. Really settled in on Cape Charles as a drawer, not only for the community and the water and the fishing that I enjoy, but also to draw the grandkids to come visit the beach. Oh, Nana and Papa are there. So we're very happy with what our decision was there. I've been now on council for over 4 years, and it's interesting the difference between today and 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I was scrambling to prepare for myself here. Now I've really spent a lot of time digging into some of the issues and the ordinances that we have, so I'm very familiar and comfortable where we are right now. Over a course of time, I felt, though, I needed to branch out beyond Cape Charles in order to All right.
30 seconds.
All right, branch out into the county, and that's, I was able to get appointed to the Eastern Shore Groundwater Committee, dealing with the protection of our aquifers, and also I'm on the Northampton County Economic Development Authority. So again, I've kind of seen in the past, we've been locked together with just concentrating on Cape Charles, but I see us as a member of the county and having to participate and converse at that level.
Okay. So I'm Tammy Holloway, and Jim and I live on Tazewell, right up the street here. And we've had the Bay Haven Inn now for almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in November. To many friends and colleagues in B&Bs, and I see some of you in the audience will laugh at this, I'm the unofficial ambassador of Cape Charles. My passion about Cape Charles is really infectious, and I enjoy that. Whether you're born here or you chose to come here or you came back here, we all share a love for this town and a passion for it. I have personally a passion for hanging on to some of that past and history and making sure that's still here, as well as planning and managing our direction for the future. I think that's critical and where we're at. I looked back at what I said I would do in 2018 to see if I held up to some of my promises. I don't really believe in the platform thing, but I did have goals, and I was able to accomplish many of those, and I was glad to see that. But what I didn't realize is it's a lot easier to sit out in the audience than it is up here to actually get the work done, and how hard and how much of a commitment that takes. So I'm proud of where we've come, but we had some really challenges over the last 4 years, some of them being significant staff issues and a global pandemic. So it slowed down some of those priorities that we certainly thought right out of the game, boom, boom, boom. And you have to readjust, and I think that's one of the things in leadership you have to do. And sometimes what you feel is most important isn't the most important thing for the town.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellen O'Brien. I hope everybody can hear me because I'm the one who always whispers and no one can hear me. I want to thank the Civic League for hosting this event tonight. It's always good to have an opportunity for the community to come together and learn more about the people that are hoping to be elected to these positions. It's not just a position that we come into to advocate for our views. We're here to advocate for the views of the community, not our businesses, not any special interests. So in making decisions that impact our community, not one council member makes a decision. It's a collective council as a whole. And we're faced with many big decisions, from the use of the railroad property to the water treatment, wastewater plant. These are big decisions that need a wide lens of transparency and a broad mind to consider, given the long-term implications of these decisions. And there's some low-hanging fruit that we should work on to resolve quickly. You're probably familiar with them: parking, boats in the street, litter on the beach, public safety. These issues that seem to show up again and again, yet nothing seems to happen to resolve them. And if we lack the resources to meet these demands, then we need to make that a priority to get those resources available. And to say that I'm campaigning on any one issue would be an inaccurate statement, because as council members, we cannot pick and choose the issues. We have to deal with all of them. And in my opinion, as a member of this community, we have settled too long, and now is the time. It's almost too late. We need to make a priority to deal with these issues now that have waited too long. Thanks. Look at that.
Hi, I'm Adam Charney, and my wife Melissa in the back and I just celebrated our 33rd anniversary on the night, and we have been lucky enough to be in Cape Charles since 2013. We started in Bay Creek for 3 years until we found our home on Harbor. Once we purchased that home, it actually took us about a year to renovate that home, and it is now our permanent. When I first started or signed up to run for mayor, I jumped right in. I made sure I got to the meetings, really started to learn what it took to run this town. And I am committed. I don't know if you've seen, I've been around, I just finished the door knocking today in Historic. I'll be over to Bay Creek next month with a bunch of meet and greets over there. But I'm fully committed. I love this town. We fell in love with it the minute we came here. And I know there are a lot of issues. I've talked to a lot of you personally in your homes, as well as the forums like this, and I'm committed to find what we need to do to keep Cape Charles charming. That's, if you saw my signs coming in, that's what I'm running on. We need to keep the history here in Cape Charles. And, you know, find a way to just find that. Didn't know I'd be this nervous.
So, Tim McClatchy, obviously it's always good last because there's 5 great stories and 5 people that are completely committed. I'm probably going to take a little bit different tack on this because I think our opening was what we're committed to and what we really believe in. So, responsible growth, sustainable growth is my #1 goal. My second goal that I really believe in is finding a solution for workforce housing. And I think the third goal that I think is very important, and I think everyone in this room, and I thank everybody for attending, I thank the Civic League. I think there's misconceptions about the water treatment facility. And hopefully we can get asked those questions tonight because I think it's very important. John has done an incredible job. He's researched this. There is multiple documents on this to figure out if it is good or bad. I've talked to council, I've talked to Hampton County, Northampton County. I've talked to a lot of people and there's a lot of misconceptions. And these are the 3 of the most important things. I think also the parking, bringing Cape Charles back together as one community. And as mayor, I think it's very important that you listen to both sides of the story. You listen to what you don't agree with and you agree, but you listen with an open mind. And you are an influencer as the mayor. I think once in the last 6 years, you're the final vote, but you're an influencer to every person. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome. This is going to be, at least the first segment, centered around 4 primary issues. These are kind of the 4 staples of the Civic League. This includes parking, the Historic District Review Board guidelines, sidewalks and crosswalks, and dune and beach management. If everybody's okay with it, we'll go ahead and dive right in. Similar to what we just discussed, everyone has 90 seconds, and we'll go from there. The first question, this will be posed to everyone, is for Ken. The topic is safe streets. Sidewalks have long been an issue in town with missing and uneven spaces throughout the historic district. We have streets that pedestrians regularly cross, but cars are not reminded to yield. The common response is that it's a state issue, and to a large degree this may be true, but now more than any time in the past 60 years, there are federal funds and grants available to the state, county, and town for infrastructure improvement. What suggestions do you have to make safe sidewalks and crosswalks in the historic district a higher priority?
There's a couple of things I think we need to do. First, because the sidewalks are controlled by VDOT, we've got to be able to work with VDOT. So building relationships there is very important. Especially within the commercial corridor, we've got to be able to define what part is in the public right-of-way and what part of those sidewalks belong to the buildings and the building owners. So by delineating those things, we can also help make sure that there is safe passageway along sidewalks. It's very difficult sometimes if you are in a wheelchair or with young children with strollers to be able to make it down the sidewalk. So that's got to be taken care of. In areas where we lack sidewalks, we do have an ordinance, new construction is supposed to be putting in sidewalks. We may want to look at something that says as you sell your existing house, putting in a sidewalk becomes part of that sale. As I think Ellen mentioned, removing long-term storage of boats and campers from the streets. The ordinance says 48 hours. That's all they're allowed. We need to enforce that ordinance. So I think that's an important piece.
Thank you, Ken. I'm assuming the noise is coming from my children. But,
The dad and you're like giving them the eye.
Paul, if you'd like.
All right, so I'll start out with the sidewalk aspects. The town council had put together a plan. It was a subcommittee that I participated on that kind of remapped the sidewalks and identified areas that we had gaps in, and then proposed for our capital plan what sidewalk should be worked on and in what fashion. So that is all mapped out right now, can be dusted off and updated, but right now we've got a placeholder in our capital plan. It's not this year, it's a year or two out, but we have monies that we're targeting in order to address the sidewalk situation. For the gaps, I'll call it. With regards to the street parking, that is something that needs to be dusted off as far as a master plan for parking. We had a plan put together a number of years ago. We have to pull that out. That is on the list of priorities that the town council has put together. So these are not subjects that we haven't forgotten about, but we have a list of priorities that we had agreed to back in March, and we dust them off every 6 months, 9 months when we go through budget reviews and reset those priorities. And that's a good time for public, again, to step up, because we have very little input when it comes down to that, other than what each of the council people bring to the table in setting priorities.
Thank you, Paul.
It's going to be harder and harder to get to differentiate, because I have been a
Yeah.
part of both of these things through council, and Paul has done an excellent job in that parking committee and that report. I focused my efforts through our commercial district and identifying where crosswalks should be and where loading zones should be, and some of the height of those sidewalks on Mason Avenue, like if you're looking at Strawberry Street Plaza, that height of a sidewalk is completely unsafe. But I think I go back to Ken in the beginning, and that is, we try very hard to build a solid relationship with VDOT. If you've ever come to a council meeting, or if you've ever listened, you know that I call them the four-letter word sometimes, because they are 4 letters. And they are challenging, and we are not their favorite town. And Mr. Hosey is working hard at developing that relationship. But the only way we're going to get things done is through that relationship. And I think it is time to hit the grants and infrastructure bills, because that's the way we're going to get funding, and that's the big dollar. If we say, okay, we're going to do it, we've got to get the funds to do so. Is that?
That's not me.
Not me?
Not
Okay.
the
I'm like Pavlov, like, sorry.
How did you factor that into
I don't
your
know.
statement there? Wow.
So I think that that's important. I hope that we're going to talk about boats and trailers at another time. So I'll keep that aside, because
next.
that's a
Yep.
separate, okay.
And going forward, anytime, we're going to try not to cut anyone off. Please
Okay.
finish your thought if you get chimed out
Yeah,
here.
thank you.
I'm kind of scrambling for more thoughts,
Yeah.
because these three have kind of put in there. But I think improving the relationship with VDOT has to be at the top of the list. And I don't like the phrase dusting it off, because it seems like it's sat. It needs to be a priority, and I think if you hear that phrase, it kind of says, oh, you haven't thought about it in a while. And I know that we've talked about it. I know we've talked about crosswalks, and it immediately goes to VDOT. We need to just do it. I mean, it needs to happen before some of these other things that we may think are more important. I think workforce housing is very important, but we can do more than one thing at a time. And someone's going to get run over on Mason Avenue trying to cross the street. I see a gentleman in his motorized wheelchair every morning when I'm walking, and he's cruising up Randolph Avenue. So he's like one 18-wheeler away from getting run over. So we just really need to make it a priority, and I think that everybody can agree on that. So I'm going to give the rest of my time to
Thank you.
So just to echo everything, number one is VDOT, without a doubt. I mean, the relationship needs to be mended. For whatever reasons, the relationship is just not there at all. Cape Charles is not their best friend right now. And talking about the sidewalks, I've been to a lot of the Civic League meetings now, and sidewalk comes up every time. And we have had some wins. We've got in some crosswalks already. We've got the signs on Bay Avenue now, which has helped a lot for people crossing the streets there. I think outside of the grants and other ways to get money, I think it's time for some of our guests and vacationers coming here to start putting in a little bit more, and maybe finding some money that way to get the sidewalks done. It's high time. I mean, whether we like it or not, it's, they're coming, they come every year, and you know, they can pay their fair share when they get here. And not, you know, not an amount to run them out, but an amount to get the sidewalks done. Make it safe for them here, make it safe for them to walk their kids to the beach, so on and so forth. So, I mean, on the sidewalks, if we're gonna go back to the boats and everything else, and the carts, I'll get that on the next one, but, yeah, I have definitely issues there as well, so, Tim.
Does this mean I get 7 minutes because everybody keeps deferring? No, I'm fine. So, I mean, they articulated very well, and I think when you mentioned Build Back Better, there is a lot of funds and grants. There's a lot of work. Everything ties in. So when you look at the water treatment, which we will talk about in a little bit, there's capital funds from that. There's capital funds from Build Back Better. We need to be able to apply, we need to go to VDOT, we need to be able to have these conversations. John does a great job. John has 50 different things on his plate. There's almost impossible to keep up with everything that's going on. We are a small town with issues that a lot of bigger towns face. And it is hard to address everything, and I think the sentiment over here was perfect. We can do things in parallel. We have priorities on these, but what is the most important? And where does the financing come? And then who takes that lead on those? I sat with Liz Jones from the school board the other day and David Wilcox. It's like, we have a priority of 12 things. And I always say, which ones are first, second, third, and fourth, and which ones can we do in parallel? And I think the same thing needs to happen with our issues that we're having within Cape Charles with solutions. And we need to listen to everybody's input, and we need to be very level-headed, because we don't have every answer. Everybody in this audience does not have every answer. But as a combined group, can I finish it?
Please,
Yeah.
please,
We actually
please.
will get a solution to the issues within Cape Charles that will benefit Cape Charles, and that's the most important factor.
Thank you. Moving on to parking, trailers, boats, what everyone's been waiting for. Paul, we're going to start with you on this one.
Sure.
One of the frustrations of living in a resort town is parking. In the historic district, we have seen short-term renters renting one home taking up multiple spaces in front of neighbors' homes, locals and vacationers storing their boats and trailers on streets for weeks at end, and golf carts taking up all the parking along the beach and throughout town. In 2019, the General Assembly authorized the town to regulate parking on our town streets. What would you like to see included in the town's parking ordinance?
Well, personally, I would like to see it very clearly stated what our ordinances require on the streets, and then obviously couple that with enforcement. We had a town hall probably 2 years ago now. COVID got in the way, but we had a town hall here where I brought different examples of what other entities have done across the nation to say, here's how they tackled this particular problem. And there were all different sorts of solutions in front of us. But at that time, all it was a dialogue. We had boaters and RVers and residents discussing back and forth and really not able to home in on any one given solution, given the sentiment at that particular time. We have it on, I'm going to keep repeating. We have a list of priorities that the town council has adopted. Back in March 17th, we have the list. It's a 12-item list. And those are the priorities that we have given to the town manager that we help support to walk through. All these issues that we're talking about here are on that list. The fact you don't see it addressed like today is because I have other priorities that town council has agreed to tackle first. So that's not to say that you can't come in and say, hey, I want priority number 7 to move up to 4 and have a discussion on that. But right now, town council has that on the books that we will follow until the time it changes, which we will review on a 6-month basis.
Thank you. Tammy?
I'll tag team just quickly on that. The town staff is incredible in multitasking. So there might be the number 1 through number 12, and the town manager's working on 1 through 4 at the same time. It's not just waiting till one's
Right.
complete and checking it off, because we really wouldn't get anything done if that were the case. So I commend them. I needed to say that. Probably don't know that we're a Dillon state, and so the reason that it didn't come forward that we could actually start this ordinance is because we weren't allowed to until we had to go to the General Assembly to get permission to come up with an ordinance for boats and trailers. We had that meeting in February 2020 with not any knowledge of what would happen a mere 30 days later. That shut things down and going through a new town manager. It is right there on that priority list. What would I think to be important in that ordinance? What I think is important is getting those people back together, and I suggested at that day that we have a group. I'm really big in involvement of multi-levels, citizens, planning commission, town staff, and council member to come up with some solutions to that. I'm not knowledgeable enough to come up with what specifically that would be, but Paul did a lot of research on examples. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can start literally with that. And I think the key that we've been hesitant on is that we want a solution of where boats and trailers could go. We are a coastal community, and boats are part of our community. And we can't just say, nope, none of those.
Thank you. Alan?
I think there's a lot of space around us, and there are probably people with land somehow that we could figure out where the boats could be. We've got a big lot that no one seems to use. I think there's an issue with enforcing the ordinance. If the ordinance didn't get to where it needed to be because of the pandemic, it's 2022, and we dropped the ball on it. I think that's okay to say. I will say, I don't think I was on this council at that point. But if we took it this far and we didn't get it over there, then we have to own that. I think coming up with creative solutions to, I know that there have been 3 or 4 people that are in this room now that stood in front of us and complained about boats on the street. So to stand here now and sort of defend why it's not happened yet, it just falls weak to me, and I'd love you guys and respect you with everything I've got. So, but I'm hearing, and I hear it from everybody, that we need to come up with a solution. Just yesterday, I was driving up Randolph Avenue, and there were 2 trailers parked on either side, and you have to go down to 1 car passes, and you're playing chicken to see who's going to get there first. It's something bad is going to happen. So, I mean, I get it. We've got to go back to it and deal with it, but I just think it needs to happen right away. And as far as our list of priorities that we've agreed on, I think everybody who's here needs to come to these meetings and be involved and say, I don't like number 6 in number 6 position. I want it to be at 12 and move 12 up to 2. Because we sit in a room, we're like, does that sound good? Yeah, that sounds good. Let's stick with that. And that doesn't please anybody other than the people that are in the room.
Thank you. Adam?
So on the boats and trailers, I think it's definitely something that can be moved up, because I think it can be moved up quickly. I don't think it's something that has to be debated. The ordinance is there. I think it does have to be finalized and detailed. But the first thing we can do is get rid of the abandoned ones. There are so many that have been sitting there for years. There's one just on the other side of my house where the tire is completely into the asphalt. Those shouldn't have to go to an ordinance. Those should be towed somewhere at whoever the owner's expense is. We have no idea who the owners are. They've been there for so long. Same thing with the trailers, same thing with anything else that's abandoned. Then the next part of that would be making sure that the people's boats that are on the streets are in front of their homes. Because that's a big problem too. A lot of these boats are coming from other places. They're getting set in front of your homes because it is a public road, so they can just be put anywhere. So there's a lot of things that need to be done with the parking on those as far as how we're going to get rid of them. I do agree that there needs to be somewhere to put these boats. There should be some kind of lot that's available, whether it's a town lot or, like Ellen said, to find someone that would be willing to put their land up, to put the boats in, so that they do have somewhere to take them. But it definitely is a problem. Just walking today, I talked to at least 3 people, and that was actually their biggest issue when we talked about, what their concerns was. So I agree, if it's 7, I'm actually looking at the list right now, I don't really see exactly what it is, but I think it should be one that's moved up to the top pretty quickly.
Thank you. Tim?
Well, I think we're all in agreement on where the boats need to go and that we have a major issue and it needs to be moved up on the priorities. So I don't know if I'm gonna have the solution. I think one of the solutions Adam said is we need a situation where people can put their boats. We are a very coastal town and we were built on watermen who love their boats, our visitors love their boats. So that needs to be resolved, because what we don't want to do is we don't want people to come and visit, and we don't want people to feel that we have a hostile feeling towards those. I think the other issue that we addressed first was parking. So we have 63 spots that are adjacent to Mason. And I can tell you, my wife and I come through town, drive our golf cart, they're never full. I've never seen more than 8 or 9 cars behind there. I think there's an awareness issue. I don't think people realize that there's parking. The signage when you come in, nobody knows it's there. We need to be able to make sure that people understand there's 63 spots, because we don't want them double parked. And you can park golf carts there, you can park carts there. There is also boats that are parked there that are double parked and they're taking up spots, which is also an issue. The second issue, if parking becomes a major issue down the road, and this is a VDOT issue, but it's been suggested by many people to me that the strip along the beach where the median is, that we can get approval to remove that strip and add parking on both sides. That's an option that we certainly can have a discussion about.
Thank you, everyone. Moving on.
I could just add in one other.
One more. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Ken.
Not a problem. I too agree about abandoned vehicles, streets, but there are also in alleys too. I've got a meeting tomorrow, as part of my job as the zoning compliance officer, with police, public works, building official, to develop procedures that all of us will use when we have abandoned vehicles that have been tagged by the police. How do we get those removed? Who's responsible for it? Where do they go? How do we notify? That's not difficult to do. People haven't stepped up to do it. And so we're making progress on that. We've gotten a good number of them removed already from alleys. I think that there are other options. For a while ago, the town looked at the lot behind the library as a parking area. That's been sitting vacant. That is something, I don't know that we want to do that, but it's a possibility for us to look at. I think we need to, before we begin to increase density in housing with ADUs, with residents above commercial area, possibly allowing duplexes, we've got to consider how does that impact the amount of cars on the street. So that's not just something, oh, let's just do it. Let's make sure we consider all that as well. And I think we need to work with vacation rental owners.
Perfect.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone else? So, moving on to the third question from the Civic League. It's Historic District Guidelines. Just last week, the town released the first public draft of the new Cape Charles Historic District Overlay Design Guidelines. Straightforward, have you had a chance to review these guidelines? And what concerns do you have with the guidelines and or the process moving forward? Tammy, we'll start with you.
So yes, I did. Obviously, I was at that meeting last week. I was impressed at the follow-up from the consultants from our first take at it. One of the things I had suggested is that people need visual guides of how to go through the process, not a lot of words to guide them through. And I was impressed with those changes because we want it to be user-friendly and that people have a hold of that from the beginning. Biggest concern was the map discrepancy that was discovered. I would be an idiot if I didn't bring that too. So I left that meeting thinking that has to be addressed first and foremost. But I think we're moving in the right direction. The council wants to give the Historic District Review Board the tools to be successful, and we want to be able to support that throughout. It is very important that we hold on to the charm of our town. Every day I do a tour with my guests. I talk about the history of how we've gotten here. I talk about the Bruce and Carol Evans from the early days and putting those guidelines together and guiding us. We wouldn't look like we did if they didn't do that in the 90s. So it's certainly very important. I think we're on the right track. I don't think we want to rush something and do it wrong. I think we want to get this right all the way through.
I would agree with what Tammy said, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that we really need to thank the Historic District Review Board that dealt with all of the applicants that came forward when they had an inadequate guide to work with. It was a really challenging time for them. And I think now, as we come forward with something that's new and colorful and it, very well detailed and explanatory, that we didn't have that, and so there's this sort of, well, we did this then, and so the change to something new is a good thing, but we can't say that what's happened in the past was bad because they were working with a tool that was completely inadequate. So that's really where I want to go with it. I think anytime something improves, if you've also got to pay attention to what was in the past and be thankful that we had people that, remember, volunteered to do a job that is thankless. So, and we want to have people continue to feel like they want to volunteer. So that's all I got.
So I was on Zoom for the first meeting when the company or Historic Review came in with their first draft. And to be totally honest with you, I was not impressed with them at all the first time. After being at the meeting last week, I had a change of heart. I actually thought they came in, they were prepared. It was very detailed. What I got out of the meeting was that it looked like it was going to be much more common sense going through with the Historic Review. I love hearing that light products going back actually can just go through administrative, at least that's what I heard, to where they won't have to go to Historic Review. If they're putting back like windows, like siding, like roofing, like decking, whatever the case may be, it goes straight through. Katie can take care of it, sign off. They don't have to wait for the next meeting. I think that's going to be huge for the town. I know there's probably plenty in this room, myself included, that went through a lot to get what they needed to get their homes reviewed and get them updated. I also like to see what goes in front of Historic Review, though, is that they are going to be able to reference.
That's not me.
Not us.
That they are going to be able to reference these guidelines and actually go to it. And if you put it together, an application that is detailed, every I dotted, every T crossed, that you go straight through Historic Review. It's not going to be, going after and looked over and go back to the next meeting because you missed something. And so anyway, I just hope to see that when you come in first time application, it gets approved and it goes forward and common sense starts being used.
Hey, whoever has that little buzzer, can you get me about 45 seconds in? Because when you're not first or second or third, you're kind of very repetitive to everything that everybody else is saying. I thought the meeting with the Historic Review Board was incredible. What I took out of it was two things. Cape Charles has done an incredible job for whenever it started. I haven't been here for 50 years, I haven't been here for 75 years. Since I've been here, what I've noticed is it's kind of stayed the same. Everything, you go down the street, you love it. What I took from the meeting was that it was very difficult for the community to get changes. And it was from reading the review, it's actually going to be a little bit simpler. And it's not going to be this very hard red tape because we have a lot of people in this community that aren't used to government. They're not used to rules and regulations, and it's hard to weave through that. And I think when I read through this, a lot of those things are going to be streamlined, easier to look at, and easier to done. Who's got that buzzer? Still got 20 seconds, right? So I think what's important from that, and I don't know if we addressed what was in it as much as that we were happy about it. I think the changes keep the historic district exactly how they were, but makes it easier to achieve what people want to do because it's still their homes, it's still their businesses.
Finish your sentence.
And I love that where it's going to finish at.
Thank you. Ken?
I think I agree with everything that's been said so far. the need to speed up the process, if you want to do repairs on your home, it can take forever to get that done. And then it's not just what's in the guidelines, but it's also a staffing matter. There are one or two people in the town office that have to handle all of this. For example, last year, 100 certificates of appropriateness were granted by the board. So the paperwork that has to be done with doing all of the applications, reviewing them, making sure all the material is there, does it meet the zoning requirements, does it meet the requirements for the guidelines for the historic district? That's a tremendous amount of work. And so there needs to be additional staff to make that happen. Some of that was allocated. Unfortunately, the positions have never been advertised. That needs to happen. Increasing the number of items that don't need review or don't need or that can be handled through administrative review. That's a great thing that's in the new plan. But process-wise, I think one of the reasons, if you heard what happened on the last open forum, there was a lot of questions. People who were on the HDRB hadn't seen this stuff before. So when we talk about things being open, more people, I'd like to finish this thought.
Please do.
Having shared that with HDRB, with Planning Commission, earlier on in the process, maybe some of those people would have noticed, hold it, this map isn't right, or some of these other things didn't occur. That needs to happen. That needs to be a standard part of our government.
Paul?
Okay, so with regards to the guidelines, I was on the subcommittee that was reviewing the various drafts as it came through, so I'm very comfortable what's in it. This is going to be a culmination of probably 3 years of my effort on town council. I took this on early on when I saw some inconsistencies and issues between town council and the board, and started digging in and really pulled out probably a dozen different Virginia towns and went through their ordinances and went through their design guidelines and come to a conclusion that we need to change first our ordinance, and then we got to roll that into our design guidelines. So Article 8 had been changed as of a year and a half ago. And let me tell you, I started out with Zach Pons as a planner and Sheila Burge as an ally with regards to working on that as a team. They have since gone, and I took it by myself until we got John Hosey on board. He helped carry it then through the balance of the process to get the ordinance changed. So again, once I get the design guidelines, there should be no excuses between the board making the decision and the council then backing them up, versus before claiming, the guidelines are really wishy-washy and we'll make our own decisions based on those guidelines. We should be all in the same boat coming out of this effort.
Thank you. Last question of this segment is on beach management. So the beach and dune management currently lack compatibility. The dunes vary in height, which in some places limits access to the beach and views of the water. There is vegetation and sand encroachment on the boardwalk, which is unattractive, causes hazards for people walking, so on and so forth. The town needs a beach management plan to establish standards and expectations for our beach, which will require adjustments to dune management, as both plans must complement one another. Public Works has been asked to study ways to manage the dunes and the beach. How do you envision developing the beachfront as the town's preeminent asset? And this is to Ellen to start.
I think I would start with repairing the access points first. How's this? Is that better? I think we need to start by repairing, fixing, replacing the beach access points. I think it was Randolph that was completely buried in sand for quite some time. When it comes to the dunes and the views, I'm not a professional on the proper height of the dune, and maybe I should come here with that answer, but I would rather have the view obstructed a little bit if it meant that when we get a storm surge that Bay Avenue isn't underwater. I think we would have a lot more problems with sand on Bay Avenue if the dunes were lower, given the winds that we have. I struggle with, why are we asking Public Works to do this when they are so stretched now? We have consultants for lots of things, and we have a lot of talented people right here in this town, and I think if we engage with them, we could probably come up with a plan that would work, or at least have a conversation about. I do think that the beaches are, the jewel of the town. But with that in mind, I would also say the biggest predator to our beach is the number of the people that we have here. So I'll go on a ramble about parking with that, so I don't want to do that. But we need to have vegetation in the dunes so the sand stays in place and the water stays in place. I apologize to George because his view is a little obstructed, but he's got that beautiful deck up on the second floor. He can still see out. I think we just need to remember that the water is going to come closer and closer into town over time. I don't think anybody is not thinking that that's a possibility. So we really need to be smart about and not dream about what we want for these dunes. They are a functional piece of the ecosystem, if you will.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Adam?
So, on the beaches, I've been going back and forth with this. You look at the logo of Cape Charles and you're sitting in the gazebo and you're looking at the water. Well, right now you can't see any water when you sit in the gazebo. When we first got here, there were no dunes. There was beach. It is our biggest asset in Cape Charles. It is the draw to Cape Charles. I do think that the dunes are now encroaching just too much into the water. We're losing real estate, and we definitely need to gain it back. I think there needs to be more studies done on the dunes, on the beach, how high they should be, how wide they should be. And if they can be cut down, I truly think they should be cut down, not to the bottom, but enough just to keep the sand in, but gaining back our beach, and whether that's from dredging, which I think was supposed to start after Labor Day. I don't think it has yet, but I still think it's supposed to happen. So there will be more replenishment coming back to the beach here shortly, which should build it back up. I know we have a ton over by the train tracks back there where the train yard was, where we did our first dredge that can be accessed. We have to get the vegetation out of it, but there's plenty of sand back there. And these beaches need to be built back up. We need to, get the real estate back, and because I do believe that it is the biggest draw, and it's what's going to bring people here to Cape Charles, and we have to get it back to where it was.
Thank you.
I got an extra 2 seconds. So this is actually a difficult issue because when you look at Cape Charles, the draw is the beach, the golf carts, the community. Every person I talk to says they love the beach, they love that there's no waves, they can bring their young kids, but they can also go visit the community because everybody here is friendly, everybody waves. One of the issues with the dunes is, and I don't know if everybody's familiar with this, there's tiger beetles. They have done studies on tiger beetles that are on the endangered species list. You cannot withdraw sand, you cannot cut the dunes down, you cannot cut the vegetation down without approval from the National Park Service and the U.S. Wildlife Service. I don't think people realize this. It's not something where you can just come in as town council says, hey, I'm going to take the top 12 feet off the dunes. You can't do it. You have to work with the Nature Conservancy, you have to work with the federal government, you have to work with multiple agencies to be able to actually bring these dunes down. So I just want everybody to understand that this is not a simple fix. And I agree with the sentiment of Ellen and Adam. It is a resource for us, and it is a beautiful resource, and it attracts. We also need to have more resources for the town, for the public works. We have litter, we have access problems, we have a lot of different issues up there. And this will go back, I think, a little bit to a further conversation we're having about budget, capital improvement, etc.
Thank you. Ken?
I think it's also important to remember that the beach is not a natural feature of our town. That wasn't there, that's all man-made. And to the best of my knowledge, dredging is not going to be occurring this year just because of the cost of that. So replenishment could be a challenge. I think there's an opportunity to create a volunteer organization like Citizens for Central Park that would be Citizens for the Beach or some name along those lines, but who would volunteer and be trained by some of our public works people to blow sand off of the walkways, to make sure that the overstretched public works folks that we have, cleaning up the beach, removing, when people plant their tents and all their materials, leave it overnight so that the next morning they've got a spot, that can't be done. That's got to be removed. Well, Public Works can't handle that. So I think a citizen organization that helps support the beach is a possibility we should look into. That would be one I would add to that.
Thank you.
Okay, I can make mine real short, response real short. Number 13. Okay, again, we have recognized it as town council that the beach is utmost importance to the town and economy. So we understand we need to come up with and set the criteria through a plan as to how to control the beach. Right now, we're finally mapping elevation-wise and width-wise the dunes. The dunes move. We know that. But we need to be able to say, okay, ultimately, here's the plan, and here's where we cap it off, and here's the width that we're trying to achieve, and set up our screens and replenishment of sand accordingly. But that is of utmost importance, is first put the plan together and then determine the extent of need from Public Works and or from the citizens in order to go there. So for me, the plan is the first thing that needs to be put together, and we're looking at Public Works and perhaps even the Wetland Board with some expertise in there to do that kind of work.
So I'll tag team a little bit on that. I encourage all of you to go to capecharles.org and put in dunes management, because there is a really good plan that was in place, and it was done with a lot of citizen input in 2016 and 2018. It was adopted by the town council in 19. But the problem with that plan is it just focused on kind of managing the natural resources. It didn't talk about managing the realistic resources, and that our winter storms close in all of our access points to the beach. How do we get into those, and how do we staff that? We don't have a plan for that. As Paul said, it is in the priority list, and good news is it's scheduled to be on docket in January of 2023. I look at it in a way that it's one of our other assets in town, like Central Park, the harbor, and the commercial district. The beach is just as important of an asset. And I think we don't have enough resources for that staff-wise. I think we should be looking at staffing that's designated to manage this area, and that is their primary job. Then they fill in other places, but this is their primary job. And that's budget item, and we need to make sure that's a priority. If we're coming up with a beach master plan, which is what I would encourage, and that is we take a look at improving our bathhouses, our bathrooms into a bathhouse. We have recreational areas at the beach. We manage food trucks and our dunes. That's all one big master plan for the beach, one of our biggest assets. So I look at staffing as our number one issue for this, to really pull that together.
Thank you. With that, we conclude kind of this first segment across these four categories. We want to collect any questions anyone has in the audience. There are index cards. You can fill out a question, submit it, and we'll go from there. But in the meantime, we have several email questions earlier. Topics vary. We have tried to organize these as best we can. Format, again, 90 seconds per question, but this time to get through as many questions as we can, we're going to go two at a time. So I apologize for not everyone getting to answer the same question, for Tim not being able to repeat.
2 people at a time or 2 questions at a time?
2 people at a time. So the first question will be for Adam and Tim. The second question will go back to Ken and Paul. Tammy and Ellen will cycle through that way for the remainder. So, like I said, if anyone in the audience wants to get any questions in, now is the time. Otherwise, if we're ready, I'll keep going. Okay, we have, it looks like 3 questions on the historic district. So the first is quality of life. What would you like to see remain in Cape Charles that is slowly fading? This is to Adam and Tim.
So, what I love about Cape Charles and seeing here and what I've heard from a lot of people that's starting to change is just, I spend more time on my porch than I do in my house. I love it. I love sitting out there, just talking to the people, seeing everything going by. And I do see the changes that are happening. Burgos, Airbnbs, short-term rentals are coming in. We are at a time right now, I think, with the economy and the rates, where we're gonna have a bit of a slowdown, just because of what's going on. And I think because of that, we're gonna have to take a deep look into what we need to do to find a balance with the town and make sure that, you know, we don't let it get overrun and become a tourist town, because that's the last thing I want to see. I came here for the charm, I came here for the history, and I love it. And that's what we need to keep in the town of Cape Charles. And that balance is something that we need to put together. And like we were talking about before, I think that may be something where the residents of Cape Charles need to get together, put together a task force, just to, you know, find out some different ways and what can actually be done. Because I think just over the last few years, it's gone down a path where it has gone pretty far. But like I said, I think we're at a place now where we can find solutions to the problems and, you know, like I said, find a way to have everybody work together and, like I said, just keep the town how it is.
Tim?
So I think what really is the most important about Cape Charles, and I'll agree with Adam, is its charm. I think what we're losing a little bit within the tourist, we're gonna have tourists, and that's why we talk about responsible growth, sustainable growth. I think there needs to be, and I don't know if it's a task force, if it's the town people, what we're doing is we're now getting a group of tourists that are coming in that are not like people from Cape Charles. They're not as friendly. They're starting to get hostile. And we need to figure out a way to really keep the town of Cape Charles the way Cape Charles is and what everybody loves. And I don't know if this is, because I don't think any of us have the answer to this, because it's not kicking tourists out. It's not limiting tourists. It's not stopping where they can stay. It really is stopping the conditions, and I don't know if it is a police issue about hostility. I don't know if it's that we're now getting so set in our ways that we don't want tourists here, so therefore we're getting a little less tolerant of it. They're not going. We're not going. We all love it here. I think we're all here for the same reason. We love our community. We love being able to say hi to everybody, knowing everybody's name. There does have to be a happy medium to fix. So I don't think anything needs to change. I think attitudes need to change a little bit, especially for the tourists that are coming in and how we tolerate that.
Thank you. This is to Ken and Paul, Historic District, Quality of Life. The town has changed drastically over the past few years. How do we strike a better balance between being a community where people want to live and being a vacation rental destination?
I think one of the, in a meeting we had a while back in the fire hall, we talked about how do we create a balance between full-time residents, part-time residents. I think a piece of what we need to do is through economic development. How can there be more ways for people to be here, maybe a little younger than, I'll say me, who are still working full-time? Maybe we look at ways to increase telework, those kinds of opportunities to bring more full-time residents into the community. I think that would help us a lot. But I don't think it needs to be a us versus them, and as soon as we start moving into those areas, I think we all suffer from that. If you look back, there's a video available on the town website of what the town was like in 1991. There's a police car with, I think, somebody with a very large camcorder probably on their shoulder as they drove up and down every street. And you can see what the town was like in 1991. It's worth looking at if you haven't seen that to compare to what things are like today. Physically, our town is looking pretty good, and that's due to a lot of people who have invested a lot and put a lot into the town. So I don't know that we need to create that animosity.
Thank you.
For me, I think short-term rentals is an issue that we're going to tackle, and we have to tackle. I've been collecting information with regards to short-term rentals. I went up to Nancock, one of their town councils were discussing tot tax and short-term rentals as far as what Nancock was doing. The other night, I drove up to Parksley to attend their town council because they had that as a subject. Again, I'm trying to solicit ideas as to how best to control, because there is a need to weigh the balance of short-term rentals versus the town residents. There's got to be some happy medium, and I can't tell you what that percentage is, but I can see it in looking at the different things that we can impose is actually putting a cap on short-term rentals in the town. People may say they don't like it, but I think we're there. That is the only solution. Others have said, oh, you can't have them between a certain distance between the two. That boat has left the dock here. The only reason I can say reasonable solution is to put a cap on it.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm reading these questions for the first time right now, but this one is for Tammy and Ellen. We hear the words historic Main Street, historic downtown, historic district. What does historic district mean to you, and how can you as town council members preserve it?
So the historic district is the designated historic district officially that we did back in 1998, 4, 5, somewhere in that middle of that, right? 8. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact date, but it's what encompasses the big rectangle of Cape Charles. The commercial district in Main Street is within that historic district, so they all play in. I missed what the other third thing was. Sorry. Well, I think what to maintain it is what we're doing with the historic guidelines. And I think the people prior to these current historic guidelines that are going to be implemented have already done that. They've worked very hard at maintaining that over the years and maintaining that charm. There were some things done in a period that nobody was watching the store, and you see those around town often, and people try to bring those as examples because they saw that somewhere else, but it was being done when it wasn't being maintained. But I think we have a good handle on it, what that is and how we're moving forward. I wish I could have answered the other 2 questions, because I've got some stuff to say about that. But darn.
Can you repeat the question?
Of course. We hear the words historic Main Street, historic downtown, historic district. What does historic district mean to you, and how can you as town council members preserve it?
So the historic district, according to me, is Washington to Mason to Fig to Bay. I was surprised last week to see that there's little portions, Jefferson cut out, little portions over here, and then there were some people who said, wait a minute, we ruled on some of these houses that are not in the historic district. So I don't know, and I'm curious as to why certain areas were not in the historic district. I think part of what I can do as a council member is to try and help facilitate communication from realtors to property buyers, that they understand when they're buying a house in the historic district that it comes with certain responsibilities and rules. That tool, as far as I know, doesn't exist, so we need to write that and allow that to be disseminated to home buyers and get the input from the historic district and from the board and also from people in the community. So it's a curious question, and I think that a lot of people, I don't know, I think a lot of people think that it is Washington to Mason to Fig and Bay, and it's not. And I think that should change.
Thank you. Next question, we are categorized as peak season. We're going to go to the same two, but we're going to switch the order. So this will go to Tim first, then Adam. Affordable housing is a huge problem, not only on the Eastern Shore, but in Cape Charles. One thing that contributes to a lack of affordable housing is the proliferation of short-term rentals. Several localities have put in controls that limit either the number or percentage of short-term rentals in their towns. Would you consider a cap on short-term vacation rentals? If yes, what plan would you put forward to limit and control the number of short-term rentals in town? A lot of questions there.
There's a lot of questions. So, first of all, I want to be careful with affordable housing, because affordable housing is actually, the definition of it is Section 8.
Yeah.
What we need to discuss is workforce housing. And there's a plan in place right now, and I'll go for the workforce housing first. There's a plan in place right now for 60 units. The 60 units is very close to approval. It'll be 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms. If you want to use the term affordable, I call it workplace. The amount of money you can make as combined income is $90,000. After the $90,000, then you have to decide what you want to do. This is very important because this will attract a younger group. This will attract teachers, police officers, firefighters, people that we are lacking in the community right now, chefs. So to me, that's workforce housing, it's not affordable housing. When we talk about 30-day rentals, 60-day rentals, that is a town council. That is not a mayor. What the mayor does is, he is an influencer of what is happening. He's a person that listens to every citizen, takes their advice. He doesn't take sides on it. He's an arbitrator. He's the face of the Cape Charles. He comes to the council, he comes to the zoning commission, he comes to all the boards, he comes to the Civic League. He understands what they want, and then he addresses it with the appropriate people to address it. He does not vote. He is not a decision maker.
So, Tim, I appreciate the response, but just to hit on the one question in here, would you consider a cap on short-term vacation rentals?
So I think that discussion has been there. It's what I consider it. I would listen to every party involved, because you know what? There could be 12 people that are very influential in Cape Charles that don't want a cap, that are gaining revenue from it. But until you speak to everyone, if that is the will of the people, I don't serve myself. I serve every citizen in Cape Charles and have the conversation with them. Would I personally consider? Absolutely. But I'm not voting for me personally. I'm voting for everybody that is here. And I think that's one of the issues that people forget. We're here to represent people. We're not here to represent ourselves. So yes, in my mind, love to see a cap. I'm one person of a lot of citizens in Cape Charles that have a vote and that get affected by every decision that town council makes and that I decide to influence. So the answer is yes, with a caveat.
Thank you. Adam?
As far as the question goes, as far as having a cap, I would say yes, if there was a way to make it happen. That's where you have the problem. Because right now, there are already many short-term rentals out there, and to try to put something in place right now, where does the fairness come in? Your next door neighbor has a short-term rental, you're selling yours, the limit's capped, you can't have any more. The value of your home is just plummeted because you now have no income or no income stream from your home. And that's where there's going to be a problem. I don't know exactly how you do put in those ordinances or if it even can be put in at this point, because it is going to be a huge difference. You know, we know what the homes are selling for. We know what they went up to. Like I said, we are going to have a little bit of time right now to try to find some kind of resolution, because I think everything is going to slow down for at least the next 6 months. Just like I said, just because of the economy and rates. So I think now is the time to really dive deep into this and find out what we can do. And if a limit can be put on to the short-term rentals, then yes, I think that should be something that should be done. And not only in the historic district here, but we also have to look over in Bay Creek as well.
Thank you. Next question, related. This is for Paul and Ken.
Can you make it a little easier this time?
Let me see, I can sift through these if you'd like. With the increase in county taxes, what are the candidates' positions in regards to increasing occupancy taxes from rental properties to reduce the burden on full-time residents? This extra income could also help offset costs of planned town improvements.
Okay, so for the, I'll call it the tot tax, we had increased the tot tax, not this last budget, the budget before, put a percentage, and then we put also an added dollar per room on top of that, which was an adder that is now a feeder into our budget cycle. I am not looking to increase that at the present time. I look at the county just went through their tot tax over the past year at the Board of Supervisors meeting last night, and they had a dramatic increase. And a contributor is part of Cape Charles. They take a slice for that as well. So everybody is benefiting from what we have, and I'm not looking to increase the taxes on that aspect as of right now.
Thank you. Ken.
Short answer is, I agree with Paul.
Okay. Moving on, we've got the municipal building up next. Ellen and Tammy.
We got the short end of the straw over here. Teasing.
Okay.
We're ready. We can
This
take
is
it.
to Ellen first. The building that we are presently in is said to be sold to help finance our new municipal building. Do you think we should sell another historic property for this endeavor? I'm not sure if that means it, as opposed to this one, take that however you see fit.
I don't. I think that there are ways of getting money that would allow us to accomplish that goal without selling this building, the library. I agree that the town building is really kind of disgusting. There's black mold. Someone with a cane is risking a broken hip to try to get to the second floor. Everybody's got to go to the second floor. There's not an elevator in it. The police force is unable to secure evidence. And this is all happening right in front of us, and it's probably 10 years overdue. But again, it's not on a list of priorities, and there are things that we just need to do. I think it's counterintuitive to say that we're a historic district, yet we're selling our history. So, there are other ways, whether it's grant money or other income that may come to this town by way of other means, that we can look at having funds to replace the municipal building. And frankly, I would say we've waited this long. I think we can wait a little bit longer to do it. And it just seems like it's a little bit rushed to me, in all honesty. And the perception's going to be... The perception's going to be that it's a self-serving sort of task at hand.
You have to talk.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Tammy?
I actually don't think it's too soon. If you were those employees working in those conditions, your voice would be heard differently. And also for access. Our residents and constituents cannot access that building as it needs to be. Do I think we should, I think the question was, do you think we should sell this building? If we can avoid that, I am 100% into that. And I think with the ARPA money that we're getting, we could easily avoid selling this particular building. The plan that's set forward is not to sell the library, but to utilize the second and third floor. So it's in a sense of selling the library, buying back the library portion that we use, and getting the funds from doing that. So no one is talking about kind of giving away our historic buildings in any way. I think we've made the move from the library from here to the current library really well. But I think that we have the cash as the ARPA money is the way to go, because that's money that we don't necessarily have to tap into other things. We haven't mentioned tonight something called CAMP, which is, I can't remember what the A stands for. I've been sitting up here thinking.
Assets.
Assets, thank you. Capital Assets Management Plan. And we came up with that so that we can put these types of projects on a plan over the different years and how we will budgetarily pay for them. I encourage you guys all to look at that because it really helps scope these out. But I would really hate to see this particular building sold in moving forward, but I think we need a new town office. And it's not for flashy, sexy look. It's a reality.
Thank you. Next question related for Adam and Tim. Where do you stand on the town spending upwards of $4 million on a new municipal building that could have a net negative financial return to the taxpayers?
Well, I haven't really looked into the building amount as far as how much it's going to be, but after talking to Mr. Hosey, I know that there are different ways that they are looking to raise the funds. One of them obviously being the possibility of the water plant being sold, which obviously is a whole nother issue that I'm sure a question will come up on. But I think right now, I think that we need to find the money without going further into debt. That's for sure. Where we find that money, I don't know if it's, where it would come from, whether it's grants, or we actually start getting the money from outside sources, like I was saying earlier, whether we do start getting more money from our tourists and visitors coming in here, which I do think it's high time that, something gets done. Some kind of money comes in for them. Anywhere else they go on any kind of vacation, anywhere around here, they're at least paying for something, whether it's parking, beach, whatever the case may be. Whether that generates $4 million or not, I don't know. But my view on it would be to not go into any further debt to build the new municipal building.
Thank you. Tim?
So I personally believe we need a new municipality building. If you go to any other town, small or large, there's not black mold. It is a serious health hazard. The way to pay for it. So this might be controversial, everybody might not love this, but if you read the study about the water treatment facility, everybody thinks that we're going to somehow lose control. There is an $8 to $9 million round offer for the treatment facility. Cape Charles town is $6 million in debt. That $8 to $9 million does three things for us. It pays our $6 million in debt. It gives us over $2 to $3 million in capital expenditures. It almost guarantees our rates will not go up more than 3%. I'm sure everybody within this community knows that we've had 5 fines for violations at the water treatment plant. That's an issue. That is not going to stop. The amount of money, because we need a new water treatment facility, we don't have. That would put us further in debt. Again, this is how I feel, this is the research I've done. Not everybody agrees with it. The other part of the proposal is that all members that currently work there will stay staffed there. So I think that is one of the abilities, but back to your original question, I do believe we need a new municipal building, and I 100% support it.
Thank you. Question 12, back to Ken and Paul. Tim scooped this one a little bit here, but we are moving on to the sanitary sewer system. The towns of Onancock and Exmoor have authorized the transfer of their wastewater treatment facilities to the Hampton Roads Sanitation District, HRSD. HRSD serves 20 counties and cities in the Hampton Roads area, and they're governed by a governor-appointed commission. What reasons could you give for not transferring Cape Charles wastewater treatment facility to the Hampton Roads Sanitation District?
I haven't seen the current plan that's been put together. We're gonna be having town hall meetings. October 8th, I know, is one of those meetings. And until I see what that plan is, it'd be hard for me to compare it to a competing plan. But let me say this. I believe that one thing is for sure. We need to have better water in this town. If it means hiring consulting engineers that specialize in improving the product that we all end up drinking, then we need to do that. If it means we need to sell to get to the right folks, then we have to do that. We need to determine why are things the way they are? What's the best way to fix that? Certainly the management of our system needs to improve. We've got to meet regulatory requirements. There's no excuse for that. Whether it's moving to the sanitation district or keeping it ourselves but improving the way we run it, or going with another vendor, I don't have enough information at this point to be able to answer that.
Thank you.
All right, so let me just talk about the management side. With the given violations that we've had recently at the wastewater plant, the mayor had declared an emergency given the violations that we have received over the past month or so. And we have now contracted a management agent to oversee on a temporary basis the wastewater plant. So in my mind, we quickly settled bringing expertise to oversee, and they report directly to the town manager. With regards to Hampton Roads, which was really your question, we did talk to Hampton Roads, all right? They came, met twice with Mr. Hosey, and really they have a whole different setup. They are looking to have us turn over our system in its entirety to them. We would have to deal with the debt that we have still remaining, and that's on the order of $5-6 million. So that whole arrangement for Hampton Roads, we did explore as a possibility. I'm in favor of them just expanding and including us. But when you look at the economics behind it, that was not a feasible approach for us to take. So it was evaluated and then taken off, and we are considering now the Virginia American Water proposal that will shortly come to the table.
Thank you. Next, we are back to Tammy and Ellen. Related question. You can count the number of municipalities on one hand that have been able to buy back their water and wastewater infrastructure after selling to private enterprise. This is an indication of the cost, not the general satisfaction with the operation. What in our case is different? How can we ensure that if we sell, we are protected in both the short and long term? So that is to Tammy to start. It's an accountability question.
I think that as we move to the step which we're in negotiating specifics of the agreement and contract, that's where we include those pieces in. I do think those other municipalities are correct. It's so expensive. How would you ever buy it back? But I do think we need enough protection within our agreement of satisfaction, in particular for our users. And our discussions have always held the residents of Cape Charles at the highest point of the list. How will this impact our residents in a positive way? How would it impact if in a negative way if there are things there? So it's in the negotiation, and we're at that phase. I think it's really important for people to know that's soon going to be presented publicly for people to comment on and to see those details and understand about that.
I mean, I would just have to say what Tammy said, but also to encourage people to participate in that process and come out to these public forums so they can be informed. And a little bit of, I'm being sarcastic, but the little bit of fear and feeling that we're going to get screwed in the deal, that we really need to minimize that reaction, because I toured the plant, both the water treatment plant and the wastewater plant, and it's a very small team of guys that provide this service to us, and it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's 24/7, and okay. And I think part of the problem is that these guys have not been they've not been trained over the years to deal with the things that, when things go wrong, on how to respond. And that's a failure of leadership. And the other is that, you know, the amount of building that's going on in this community now, I was over in Bay Creek yesterday, blown away at the number of houses that are going up. We have to do something. I mean, our current water treatment plant, wastewater plant is not capable of dealing with the amount of infrastructure that's going up around us. So it's not something that anyone is taking lightly.
Thank you. For better or worse, we're down to our last handful of questions here. So these are a little more all over the place in terms of topics, but this one for Tim and Adam. Environmental stewardship. Do you believe that the town should make changes to support better environmental stewardship? Examples of this might be implementing a plan for the installation of EV charging stations and adding trash cans for recycling.
Who wants to go first on this one?
I've got Tim on my list here.
Hot potato.
So this is probably a touchy subject that is probably not just a Cape Charles subject. I think it goes back to my son, who is 22 years old. Soon as, we have 6 kids, as soon as they come here, they get in the golf cart. All they do is drive around until they're almost done. So my son, I tell him I'm gonna run for mayor. He goes, Dad, I got the greatest idea in the world. I go, what? He goes, charging stations for golf carts all over the place. And I'm like, absolutely not. I said, the beauty of Cape Charles is we have this historic district, this very old town. He's like, well, wouldn't that help people? I'm like, no. I said, never mind. So listen, I am old school. I mean, I have a Suburban and a Jeep. I'm not getting an electric car until I'm mandated to get that electric car. I drive long distances, and I don't want to stop unless I need gas or I have to utilize the bathroom. So I think the answer to my question is, I'm not a firm believer in it. I don't, and I'll ask a show of hands. How many people here drive electric cars? Hybrid, okay, but you still use the gas, so all electric? Okay, so I think I just answered my question because I think my beginning statement was, this is about the citizens of Cape Charles and their needs, because we're all full-time citizens.
Go ahead.
No, we are all full-time citizens. I think what is in this room matters.
Thank you. Adam?
All right, so on that, I also agree, I do not want to see charging stations anywhere in downtown or off Front Street or Mason Avenue. I think what needs to happen, and has happened, one of our neighbors does have an electric vehicle, and they put in their own charging station. That's what they can do. If you've got a short term and they have an electric car and you want to put in a charging station, have at it. As far as the recycling goes, I'd love to see Cape Charles get some kind of recycling, but it has to be responsible recycling. Because right now, they may be separated, but then when they pick it up, it all goes together, it never gets sorted, ends up going right in the trash again. So all you're doing is wasting your time. So if we find a way to actually recycle to where it's gonna go, aluminum, paper, so be it, then I'm all for it. If it all is gonna get combined and never be recycled, then I'm not for that either.
Thank you. Back to Paul and Ken. This is on commercial operation. The question reads, we came close to selling our house in Cape Charles when the clamming operation started operating on the south side of Mason Avenue. Fortunately, the owner of the property was persuaded that he needed to come up with a better business plan. What safeguards can be put in place to make sure that businesses that locate in the Harbor District or otherwise do not encroach on residential areas?
I'll go first on that. You can talk about the clamming operations, you can talk about the concrete plant. Unless you have specific ordinances that are put in place that actually limit whether it's the pollutants or airborne items or even the noise. and then enforce it, there's not much you can do. I am of the opinion the harbor is a working harbor, and businesses should be able to operate there within the prescribed times that we state. Simple as that.
Thank you.
I would agree, and I would add that the Corps of Engineers dredges our harbor. The depth that we get it dredged to, the amount of dredging that occurs is dependent on the commercial activity that occurs in the harbor. So the more businesses we have that use that harbor, the more we can maintain the harbor. So compared to a ferry system that used to run there, having a clam boat every so often is not what the same intense use that we had before. So I think it's important that we look to bring business into the harbor. I think the harbor is an undeveloped asset or underdeveloped asset that we really need to focus on.
Thank you. We've got two left. Ellen and Tammy, tax question. I'm concerned about my taxes going up. I'm a long-time resident of Cape Charles. The short-term rentals are causing my taxes to rise. I feel overwhelmed because the visitors are the priority and not the full-time residents. Care to comment?
I agree.
I think.
Anne?
Yeah. I think anybody that's living in the historic district, in the town of Cape Charles, I'm sorry, has to feel that this year. I mean, you know, show of hands, how many went up above 40% of taxes, right?
How many above 80%? How much
Yeah.
above 100%?
So we clearly have a problem. And then we heard earlier, which it wasn't a question I was able to comment on, but that in someone who owns a short-term rental now but wants to sell it, they won't get the value of what that is. Well, should they be, you know, they're able to make a lot more money in that property weekly than any of us can, even as a B&B owner, right? So there needs to be some look at that, in particular when the county's taxes, you know, came as they did. Now, the town of Cape Charles tried to adjust that as we could. The town suffers from that because we had to, you know, kind of go tighter in our budget because everybody was going to pay so much more to the county. But I think we have to look at that. Is that one way that we can do it? I also want to say that short-term rentals provide an important thing for this community. I know that is not a popular opinion for the group tonight, but we only have 4 lodging properties in town. That's about 40, not even that anymore, probably 30 rooms available for short-term stay. So it's a really valid contribution to our community. We just have to figure out a balance, and those are coming with community standards. I know that's not the tax question, but I felt like I really wanted to get that in. We've got to get that looked at. What are our community expectations and standards?
Thank you. So
Can I continue my answer other
Yeah.
than I agree? I really do think we need to look at other ways to bring money into the town. And I'm a big proponent of charging for parking. Not any of us have to pay. We all get free parking permits. Any vacation property has to pay for a parking permit. For the number, and we have to say, okay, you get 2 cars, you get 2 permits. The owner of that property pays for those permits.
Yep.
And then wherever we are in town, whether it's Bay Avenue, Mason Avenue, and I think the first 2 blocks off of the beach, we should have paid parking. Now, this might sound like a stretch, but everybody has a smartphone, and there are apps that you can pay for parking with a smartphone. We don't want meters everywhere because they're disgusting. But there's a lot of money that can come in that way, and it's not coming out of our pockets. It will come from the visitors that come into town. We have a free beach. Nobody has free parking anywhere. So I mean, we're missing an opportunity there to bring a lot of money in that could potentially, I don't know, maybe offset our taxes. But we have to start to explore these opportunities. That's all.
Thank you. So on to the last question of the evening, and apologies that we we're unable to get to everyone's questions, but I think we've covered an awful lot of ground this evening. I can only imagine this was inspired by Paul's reference to his priority list, but if we could go across the panel here, starting with Adam, and if everyone could just talk about briefly your 2 top priorities should you be elected in this next term for town.
So the 2 top priorities right now, obviously would be the Verbo and short-term rentals and permanent residents, and finding a way to bring it all together and make it cohesive and keep our town the way it is and resident-driven. We're here full-time, we're 12 months out of the year, and, you know, the short terms aren't. So we need to find that balance with the residents and the short terms and the vacationers coming here. So that would be a top priority going forward. The other top priority is, and just coming about when all this started, is the water treatment. I am doing my due diligence. I'm actually going out to Hopewell, where Virginia, American Water did buy their water plant and their sewage plant, and we're gonna make a couple days out of it and actually sit down with our mayor and then sit down with their residents and find out exactly how it went, how it's going, if they've had increases, all the things that, you know, we're worried about losing if we lose our plant. So those would be the 2 top priorities that I would focus on. I would just have to say that the low-hanging fruit would have to be moved up though, just to put it in. So I would make it a priority with the parking, with the boats, with the RVs, anything that's abandoned. I think those need to be taken off the streets. I know we're doing the alleys because that's Cape Charles property. They can be removed immediately. So we need to find a way to get them off the streets right now because there are a lot of abandoned ones that no one even knows who they are. They say it's easy to find out, but I disagree because a lot of them don't have tags. But anyway, that would be the...
Thank you. Tim?
Well, so I think I go back to my opening statement. I think that we need to work with council, with the citizens, with all the different boards, and really figure out how we can have responsible and sustainable growth. I don't think from the roads, from the housing, from everything else, from the taxes, we can't grow at the pace we're doing right now. We're gonna price people out of here that have lived here their whole lives. How do we slow it down? I think the water treatment facility is absolutely probably one of the most high priorities for me, and I think for the majority of everybody in this room. There's 2 ways it can go. It can be, we can produce revenue out of it and take care of a lot of issues that we have from Cape Charles. We can make sure we have a long-term plan, a long-term contract with them. I don't know, buying it back, you know, if we can put that in a clause if it's part of negotiations. I think Adam's doing a great job because I talked to Alexandria and Prince William County, who are using the same service that we're negotiating with, and they're saying they've had no problems. They've actually, their price increase has not went over 3%. And I look at the water treatment facility almost like a insurance plan. When you start to have more and more people that are joined up to it, it starts to control growth. And again, I know people have a different feeling on this, but I would really encourage people to look at the studies and do their due diligence on this before they judge the best way to move forward. I have about 5 more priorities. The workforce housing is my 3rd very high priority, and I think that it's very important to everybody here because whether you have kids, you want a police officer or anything else, we need workforce housing. It is so important to this community.
Thank you. Ken?
I would say that workforce housing would be one of my top priorities, along with looking at the short-term rentals and how that affects our community in so many different ways. But as others have mentioned, there are a lot of fairly quick things we can deal with, and we need to address those right away as well.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to discount the things that are in motion right now. So utility is in motion, so I'm not going to, it's going to take its course one way or the other. Historic district guidelines are going to take its course. The comp plan is out there, and that's going to finally come to an end, thank goodness. It's taken so long. So I'll get to the things that I'm interested in is short-term rentals. That's already been mentioned. That's on our list and has to be worked on. And as far as affordable housing goes, housing is my issue. If you're going to say what's my pet thing, is housing. I'm on the Eastern Shore Coalition of Housing. I'm on the EDA subcommittee that is promoting housing. We're trying to promote workforce housing. The concentration is on workforce housing. Working with developers here in town relative to developing workforce housing. Working with or familiar with the KIP to Peak Inn piece. But for those that are talking about wanting to climb on board for workforce housing, then join our committee for planning, who is working on right now addressing a grant study that we've received for barriers to workforce housing in both the county and the 5 towns. We have a study of 60 or 70 recommendations specifically for Cape Charles that the subcommittee in planning is working its way through and saying, here's what we need to do in our ordinance space in order to alleviate that particular barrier or not. So that study is ongoing, and it's not as though we're sitting here and not doing anything.
Thank you. Tammy?
I agree with Paul on the things that are in action. You know, I think there are many that are already in process that are going to be coming to a head very soon. And I didn't make them as my top priority because they were already in action. I've been talking about short-term rental concerns for 4 years, and done studies at other places. And a lot of you know that I have been doing that. As a lodging property, we are required to have a conditional use permit. We're required to show that we have 6 parking places and different things like that. And it's never made sense to me as we've moved forward that short-term rental businesses do not have that. It kind of goes to Ellen's thought of parking and doing that. I think there's some ways, I don't consider it a low-hanging fruit because it's so important, but there's some ways and there's so many examples out there that we could jump on and get going on that very, very quickly. Unfortunately, I feel, you know, we're behind now. I see Mr. Proto here. He remembers me speaking about that before I was on council. And unfortunately, solely you can't get sometimes the momentum that you need, and it's now clear. It goes hand in hand with workforce housing. We've been talking about that through Main Street. It's not really Main Street's responsibility, but we're the folks that got Paul initially. We knew his talent and got him involved and engaged as our housing representative. I think we've turned the corner on that. But really, my next priority would be the beach master plan. It is one of our 4 assets, and we cannot look that aside. And I guess you guys are all seeing what we go through in council because of how many priorities they're all number 1, and they can't be. We have a great staff, but they can only do so much.
Thank you.
I would say all of that and transparency of local government with the citizens of the town. It's not on the list, but it's something we should practice and do better at.
Okay. Well, I want to really, thank everybody for coming out. Thank all of the candidates. We have a few more announcements to wrap up.
Yeah, hi, Gary McKinney. I've been asked to kind of wrap things up. I'll be brief. First, I'd like to thank all the candidates for your participation this evening. I feel like we've had a really productive evening. So very helpful. I'd like to thank everyone here for your attendance this evening and your obvious interest in your town. So give yourself a hand on that. With regards to the next steps, so just a few dates I'd like to remind everyone of. September the 23rd is the in-person early voting begins at the registrar's office. October the 19th, there's another candidates night sponsored by the Rotary Club that you want to be sure and attend. October the 28th is the deadline to apply for mail-in ballots. and then November 8th is the election. So we all need to get out and vote. There's one other date I'd like to mention. The Civic League is sponsoring an end of the season beach party. Saturday, the 24th of September, from 4 o'clock until whenever. It's just a great opportunity to come down to the beach. We're going to gather around the volleyball court area. Jason, the new owner of Bay's Hot Dogs, or Hot Dogs on the Bay, or whatever this company is, he's going to be there selling hot dogs. We're asking everyone to bring a beach game if you have it, to bring a friend and other family members, and to bring a dessert that you would like to share with everyone. We're just going to gather up and spend a few hours together. And again, as much as we enjoy the busy season, there's lots of nice things about it being over this year. So we'll all get together and enjoy each other's company. With that, is that it? That's it.